Welcome to episode 104 of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. We have another mixed bag show for you this week. We're going to open the show with some local news, some Ravens news. But other than that, it's going to be all national stuff as we continue our quest for the return of sports. But there is actually some good news to talk about, and that's going to be with the NBA and the NHL in particular. They're getting the wheels turning. Things are getting in motion, the early stages of their plan to come back. So that'll be the good news. But when we talk about Major League Baseball, it's going to be continued depressing news. Baseball continues to struggle to be able to figure it out. Not just the dispute between owners and players, but the effects on the minor leagues, which we have touched on the last couple weeks. Things are starting to come to light. More and more people are realizing the seriousness of the situation here, the reality of the situation for the minor leagues, and that got moved to the forefront this week. And other than that, we also had the NFL to talk about. After, I guess, 2 weeks of talking about proposed rule changes, we have real rule changes here after the committee voted on everything. No, the 4th and 15 onside kick alternative did not get passed, but there were some other things that got tweaked, some things that did get passed, and one other thing that was sort of surprising that didn't get passed, so we'll get into that. But to open up the show, we do have some Ravens news to talk about. Matthew Judon has officially signed his franchise tag contract for the 2020 season. The Ravens placed a tag on him a while ago. I'd say, was that last month or was that even back in March? It's been a while since they placed it on him, and he has now, just as of this week, signed it. The big news here, or the big, I guess, question at the time of them placing the tag on him was, will he be tagged as an outside linebacker or a defensive end? There's a big difference in terms of money. As we know with the franchise tag, you are paid based on the position, based on the market at the position. So it's not a set contract across all positions. A franchise tag for a running back looks different than a receiver, then looks different for a cornerback, and it's different for, an outside linebacker, defensive end. So there was a pretty.
I believe the way that's calculated is it's a average of the top 5 paid players at whatever position you're being tagged at. Just in case anybody wasn't sure how that worked, but you can go ahead from there.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't remember it myself. But yeah, that's the gist of it. So you can see why there would be a big gap, or a pretty sizable gap, between outside linebacker and defensive end. In that case, so Judon, I believe defensive end would warrant him a larger payday, unless I have that backwards. And that I'm sure he was, campaigning or asking to be tagged as a defensive end. The Ravens probably leaning more towards outside linebacker. Whichever one was cheaper for the Ravens, I'm sure that they would prefer that one. But Judon's an interesting case because he kind of lines up at both positions throughout each game, throughout the entire season. He'll be used in different ways, and most guys of that position are used as in this day and age. I think in the modern NFL, things aren't as concrete or set in stone as when it comes to that position of a pass rusher or an edge rusher. They get used as both. So what has happened here, and with he signed it, they've come to a compromise, reached sort of a middle ground between the two salaries, what he would have got as a defensive end versus what he would have got as an outside linebacker. They're going to meet in the middle, and it's been signed. So Judon is officially on board for the 2020 season at least. I think all my thoughts still stand from when the tag was initially placed. Everything I thought back then, I still feel now. But I guess the only question is their door still open for a trade? I think back then when we were all kind of speculating about, before the tag was placed, because this was all pre-coronavirus, when we were debating, should he get the tag, should he get signed long-term, there's other factors in play right now. You have the whole, I mean, the season's still technically up in the air. There's a lot of factors right now. So does that change anything for you? Do you think it makes a trade less likely? That sort of thing.
I think it made it look like the Ravens are interested in kind of maybe working towards a long-term deal. I think they kind of always have been, but I'm not sure what the game plan is. I have no problem with them giving him the extra money. It's a sign of, kind of a good faith measure to meet him in the middle there. And it continues, to make the organization look good and on a larger scale. I know people undervalue that, I think, a little bit, is how good of an organization and how often the Ravens seem to get these kind of things right. Without agreeing to that, there would have been an arbitration process, and it's just not something you want to go through if you can help it. So for them to be able to get to that point is a good thing. I think it makes him a better candidate for a restructure. It ate about $1 million extra in cap to give him the extra money. I don't know if the Ravens are done, but they like Matthew Judon. I think they want to see another year out of him. And at the end of the day, Nolan, they've got a lot of things to think about, and they've got a lot of players that are going to need to get paid in the relatively near future. And I'm not sure, outside of a one-year commitment, the Ravens are comfortable giving 14, 13, however many $1 million a year to Matt Judon. I'm just not sure that they're all the way there on that yet. At this point, having him here for this year is incredibly important, because without him, the edge rusher position is pretty much non-existent as far as proven commodities. So I think this was a way to kind of get him here for 1 year. If it goes really well, maybe he prices himself out. It's an easier sell for the fan base. If it goes poorly, maybe you could get him for cheaper. There's all kind of different things that go into this, but I think overall the Ravens went into this offseason thinking we can't lose Matt Judon, because right now we have no pass rushers if Matt Judon is gone. This was true when they tagged him. I mean, and I look how they approached the draft. Yeah,
I still would agree that it would not be in the Ravens' best interest to sign him long term. It's not even part of it is his performance as a player. You can't ignore that. He still teeters on the brink of being a stud, in my opinion. He, based on what he did last year with a limited supporting cast, it's easy to say, yeah, I think he's the real deal. But you look at his entire career as a whole, that's sort of an anomaly. So he's not a sure thing, and that's why there's a debate here. But it's almost less about his performance at this point and more about who else is going to need a contract on the horizon. It seems like it comes up every week in a different conversation or as a part of a different conversation, but Ronnie Stanley is going to command a big payday. Marlon Humphrey, I think we would all agree, is a guy that you would like to sign long term. And then not far down the road, you're going to have Mark Andrews, guys like that, and then obviously Lamar Jackson. So that being the biggest one. There's only so much money that can go around, and as much as the Ravens would want to keep all those guys because they're all really good players in their own right, you have to start prioritizing at some point. And to me, out of all those guys that I just listed, Judon's probably on the bottom for me.
Yeah, and another thing to consider too is, there's a lot of posturing that always goes on around the salary cap and how much it's going to jump and the new TV deals and all this, that, or the other, and all the new money that's coming in. The pandemic does have an impact on that. They've already started talking about it. Adam Schefter's already started putting, disclaimers out there that, everybody who thought the cap was going to jump a bunch in 2021, like, just be careful. We don't really know how the money's going to shake out after 2020 is over. So that's another thing, kind of an unknown that the Ravens and the other teams in the NFL have to account for. I'm just not sure there's a long-term deal here for Matt Judon. And it might be there for somebody else. And I hope he gets, paid a ton of money and has a successful career. But I would be surprised if he's part of the Ravens' long-term plan, unless he has a down year this year and he comes in at a lot cheaper number than you expected.
Yeah, and even then, I don't know. I mean, how bad of a year are we talking? Because I think after just what he did last year and the fact that he's been pretty durable throughout his entire career, I think he's already past the threshold that he can't, go back down. Like, he's already climbed the ladder enough that he can't fall. to a certain extent. I mean, a bad season, a really bad season, might impact his value a little bit, but then at that point, the debate's even tougher because now you're thinking, well, which one are we getting? Are we getting 2019 or are we getting 2020 Judon? So
Right.
that's a whole nother debate. But
a lot of factors in play here for sure. I mean, it's a tough situation. I'm happy he's here for this season because for a team that, to me is going to have to manufacture and scheme pass rush as it is, losing your best one-on-one pass rusher is not going to help that.
Absolutely. Moving on now to the NFL as a whole. I said it at the top of the show, but the last couple of weeks we were talking about proposed rule changes. The one last week was a somewhat radical one to provide an alternative to the onside kick with a 4th and 15 play. And if you got it, you convert, keep the drive going. We went over it last week. I'm sure everyone knows the details by now, but this week it was voted on. That was not passed. Not really surprised by that. I'm still waiting to see kind of the final tally, the final vote, how close it was. That, to me, that was the bigger story last week. We talked about this and our concerns with it, what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, and my main takeaway was, well, this seems to be gaining a lot of traction. It came up the year before. It's coming up again now. How close is this to actually getting passed? So I'm waiting to see a final vote number on it because to me that'll tell us how legit it is. Is this actually legit, or is this just something the sports media is propping up so they have talking points? Either way, it's still being voted on, so it is legit. But again, that did not pass. Not really surprised by that. From what I've seen from insiders, they're saying the main sources from that meeting are indicating that the committee raised many, many concerns and questions with it. We did the same on the podcast last week, so it's not surprising that a room full of decision makers would have just as many, if not more, questions. And the big concerns being defensive penalty, specifically pass interference and holding, how easy it would be at that point to convert on 4th and 15. But there were some things that did get passed, some rule changes, some rule amendments, if you will. We'll go through them quickly. Some of them, there's really not much to say, but we'll start with the first one here, which is an expansion of the replay rules. I'm quoting the rule amendment here. It says, it will make permanent the expansion of automatic replay reviews to include scoring plays and turnovers negated by a foul, and any successful or an unsuccessful try attempt. So I think this is pretty much a coverall, a blanket statement. You would not only have all scoring plays reviewed, all turnovers reviewed, but now all of that reviewed despite there being a foul in the play. That's basically what I'm taking away from this. I'm not one of those people that was concerned about the game being slowed down by a bunch of reviews. If anything, in the last couple of years, we've learned that reviews are vitally necessary because the refs cannot make the right call in real time. Sometimes we don't even get the right call with a replay. So I think I think all fans would agree that it's very necessary. It's not taking anything away from the game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you can manage to not have it completely slow down and drag out the game, the more things you can review, the better. The thing that I do have a problem with to a certain extent is, like, this is professional sports. Like, there are referees, mistakes get made, things happen. I think it's a slippery slope to continue to add more elements to replay. It might kind of renders the referees useless, which is something. Yeah, I guess it depends. I mean, there's a lot of people that blame everything, every little thing that their team loses is the ref's fault. And that's the kind of stuff that I like replay for because it can correct some of the wrongs. But at some point, there's an element of human error to officiating. Referees aren't perfect. All refs suck. Pretty much has always been my mentality. Very rarely are the referees a deciding factor in the game. Doesn't mean that never happens, but if they want to add more ways to get calls right, the problem I have is they don't get most of the time they don't get them right anyways. And I think that's my big piece is the rules are too convoluted in the replay system. Like, we could watch a replay and go, there's no way that that is pass interference. And 99% of people would agree. And they'll come back and go, oh, the call on the field stands. Like, that's the stuff that bothers me. We're slowing down the game, and it seems like we're still getting the calls wrong. So I think the spirit of replay rules makes sense to me, but the execution and the hit percentage to me isn't quite high enough to continue to introduce new elements. But that's just one guy's opinion. I'm just tired of them getting the calls wrong. I want to see them gotten right, and there's too much ambiguity in the rules. It needs to be more black and white so that there aren't instances where the entire broadcasting team and the former referee review guy that they have on each broadcast team now goes, yeah, they got this one wrong for sure. And they come back and announce the call stands. That to me looks terrible on the league.
Well, speaking of the refs, I mentioned earlier that there was one proposed rule change that did not get passed, and I found this very surprising given, again, everything that's happened the last couple of years. But adding an 8th ref to each crew as a designated booth umpire was proposed. That did not get passed, surprisingly. I felt like this was a no-brainer to have a ref in the booth, a guy that can communicate directly with the head umpire, the crew chief, and say, hey, or just handle the communication of reviews first and foremost. But beyond that, to be the guy that, the sky judge, so to speak, the guy that says, hey, you missed this one. Or, there's a blatantly obvious one. He's watching on the monitor. He's watching from above. He has a different angle in person. He also has the benefit of a camera and the TV angle. So it's sort of just another safety valve in the system, in my opinion, that at this point seems like a no-brainer to add, but it's not getting added. So I don't know. Do you feel I don't know how you feel about that. Were you someone that wanted to see a booth umpire, or is that sort of convoluting the system?
I mean, it just kind of feels redundant to a certain extent. I don't know. I've always thought this was a lot easier of a fix than whatever they typically put in place. I don't know. It's a tough situation for me because it seems so simple, but my answer is so juvenile that they'll never adapt it. But if we're sitting there watching a play like the egregious ones, like the Rams and the Saints, when that guy basically tackled the receiver in the open field while he was trying to catch the ball, like there's no reason while the replay's going, the referee can't go, oh shit, we missed that, and then throw a flag in between plays. I don't see any reason why that can't happen. It seems like they're trying to eliminate missed calls, and perhaps a booth review referee would have helped to do that. But like I said, at this point, I have no confidence that the call is going to be gotten right anyways. So whenever there's a review or there's a replay, I'm just sitting there thinking, well, I hope it goes our way. But I don't really even express, oh, there's no way, or oh, like that's definitely our ball. I never do that anymore. I could think back to plays from last season. Look at the Mark Andrews interception in Pittsburgh. That I forget the linebacker. It might have been Chicolo that caught that.
I think it was their rookie, Bush.
May have Bush. Right. Well, however it was. What play I'm talking about. And this is just, that's just one instance where I was like, well, there's no way that's an interception. And they come back, they're like, the call on the field stands. Like, whatever they do is just adding more cooks in the kitchen for me.
And real quick, the other things that did get passed, we have an amendment to the defenseless player rules. Kick returners and punt returners are now covered under this rule. Basically what I'm gathering here, and I have a question about this because I get it. Like, obviously, I think should be protected, but my question is, aren't they already protected under the fair catch rules, particularly a punt returner? If you're going to get blown up by the defense on a kick return because you don't have enough time to catch the ball and start running, you call a fair catch. But that's a rule that's already been in place, and if the defense commits what we call a fair catch interference penalty there, that's 15 yards, the same as an unnecessary roughness penalty, which would come from this new, defenseless player rule. I don't know what's different here. It makes sense. Like, obviously you should be protected, but my thing is, like I said, aren't they already protected? And what's the difference between the penalties? I don't know if you knew anything about this, but for me, The language here is basically that like a punt returner, kick returner, if they don't have time to properly establish, making a football move or attempting to run, and they get blown up by a defensive player, that'll be an unnecessary roughness penalty. They were a defenseless player at that point, similar to a receiver catching a pass across the middle and getting popped by a linebacker or a safety.
So if you don't call for a fair catch, the old rule was basically, if you don't call for a fair catch and you go to catch the ball, I can literally knock your lights out while you're trying to catch the ball. Like those bang bang hits that you see, like as they're catching, you can lay the hit and try to separate them from the ball. This is removing that. I don't like it personally. If you don't want to get hit, just put your hand in the air and call for a fair catch. I think these kick returners typically return enough to know, oh man, they're barreling down on me. If I try to catch this, I'm going to get drilled. What I think you're going to see as an unintended consequence of this rule, people are going to stop calling for fair catches. And as it gets to be those bang bang players are going to be like, I'll get blown up for 15 yards. Like I think that you're going to start seeing that, which will be kind of an unintended consequence of a rule that is meant to support the player safety narrative, but I think it might end up doing more harm than good.
Yeah, that was my immediate thought there when you were explaining it, that a returner could be like, you know what, it's a crucial part of the game right here. I'll take the hit. I'll lean into the pitch, the inside pitch, so to speak, and take my base. And yeah, that would not surprise me at all, but a receiver going across the middle, catching a dangerous pass and getting blown up by a linebacker or something, they don't have the ability to call a fair catch. They are truly defenseless. That's why it's a defenseless player rule, defenseless receiver. How can you call the kick returner or punt returner defenseless when they already have a system in place where they can defend themselves? If you opt out of defending yourself by opting out of calling a fair catch, you shouldn't be protected beyond that. You had the choice. You had the decision to defend yourself.
I'm 100% with you.
So I think this is just redundant.
It stinks to me. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of guys be like, why call for a fair catch? Maybe they'll get overzealous and blast me and we'll get 15 yards out of it. I think it's a rule that seems to make a lot of sense, but again, your unintended consequences that every NFL rule seems to have. I don't know. I've always been of the belief that CTE is really sad and concussions in football are really sad, but you don't have to play. And if that's a cold way of looking at it or the wrong way of looking at it, you're entitled to that opinion. But it's a physical sport. You keep removing all the physicality from it. I mean, it kind of starts to lose its appeal at some point, I would imagine.
And the last one here, speaking of manipulation, we saw it firsthand, most notably in the AFC wildcard game this past season. Mike Vrabel taking a page out of his former coach's playbook, a coach that he was facing in that game, Bill Belichick. And it was just outside of 5 minutes to play, so you still had a running clock and basically took multiple dead ball fouls in a row, offensive penalties, to continue to milk the clock, and it was on a punt. They were lining up to punt, and they took a delay of game. I think they had a false start. They mixed them up because at a certain point, if you commit too many of the same in a row, the refs aren't going to let that slide. That was already a rule. But they mixed it up a little bit. Bill Belichick was furious, even though that's his MO. That's a page out of his playbook. He doesn't like when things are turned on him. But that has now been eliminated. So there is now language in the rule book that you cannot basically commit many self-inflicted penalties in a row on purpose. I mean, if you're just genuinely that bad where your lineman is jumping every time on the play, then I guess it's up for interpretation. But if it's clear that you're doing this intentionally to milk the clock, it's not going to fly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with it. It works for me. I do find it ironic that Belichick has it happen to him, and the next year the league changes the rule. Kind of furthering the narrative that Belichick kind of tells Goodell what to do, and Goodell just does it. I don't fully buy into that, but at some point it does look kind of weird that, the tables are turned on him, and the next year they take the rule out of the picture. I just think that's a nice irony in the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, this one was another one pretty simple. I don't see why wasn't there something to protect against this in the first place. I guess it's probably because the league assumed no one would do it. But Belichick's always willing to kind of take advantage of any leniency in a rule to help his team win. So this takes that out of the game. It works for me, and I'm all for it.
All right, let's move on now to Major League Baseball. I have nothing major to update as far as the players and owners. We know that they sat down formally this week, and this week was being propped up as by insiders as the most important week in baseball history, or at least since the last, the 94 lockout and all that. I agree with that for sure. We're kind of reached this point where the clock is running out. And if they do intend or want to get things rolling in early July, they need to come to a decision soon. So the back and forth bickering at a certain point needs to either reach a compromise, or we just give up and say no season. One or the other has to happen. So the only thing I will update is that the owners made the first offer here this week. It was immediately scoffed at by the players' union. They shot it down, said that this is ridiculous. It's even more ridiculous than what was already out there. Not surprising. It's the first offer in a negotiation. It's going to be extreme. The players' union responded with their own offer. I don't think the details are fully out there as much as the owner's offer was, but I'm going to assume that it was just as ludicrous on the other end of the spectrum. This is just negotiating 101. Your first offer from each side is beyond what you want. You're shooting for the moon. You're shooting for things that you didn't even want in the first place in your first negotiation, in hopes that in your compromise you come back down to earth what you truly wanted. So, shoot for the moon and fall amongst the stars is how the saying goes, and that's the same in negotiating. So both ends shooting very high, and hopefully, though, the main takeaway here is that a compromise is on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp of put up or shut up. Either you want to play and you want to get it done, or you don't want to play and you don't want to get it done. Don't be surprised if you start to see stuff coming out from the owners and talking about, how they're just trying to protect the players and this, that, or the other. They'll make it virus-related if they don't think a deal's going to happen, not money-related. But the players will call them out on that bullshit, and it'll be up to the fans to decide who's the reason that we're not playing. If baseball doesn't happen, the owners and the commissioner are going to make it seem like this is a player safety issue, but they're going to have a hard time selling that when all the other leagues are back up and running. So I'm interested to see how that part of it plays out. But at this point, it's put up or shut up. Either play or don't, compromise or don't. And maybe it's because I don't love baseball the way other people do. Maybe it's because the Orioles aren't going to be any good anyways. But this is the one I honestly care the least about. At some point, either you're going to play or you're not going to play. Whether the Orioles have a season or not, really not going to impact my life too much. I'm a much bigger hockey, basketball, and especially football fan. So, I'm tired of hearing the owners and the players grumble about money. I think the players have the better case, but at some point, either you're going to play or you're not going to play. Also, I think you were going to head to this next, but props for David Price paying the Dodgers minor leaguers for the remainder of the year. There were a ton of minor leaguers that were released and let go this week, and teams dissolving. And this whole pandemic is going to change a lot of things as the way we knew them to be. So the more players that can step up and make sure the minor league guys are taken care of, the better. Yeah, I mean, if more players want to do that, more power to them. But to me, that comes down to, it's never been a good look. And this goes back to when this all started. I mean, look at Zion Williamson stepping up as a rookie. I mean, what is he, 19, 20 years old? Stepping up and paying the concession workers and ushers and ticket takers, everybody that works at the arena there for the Pelicans, and saying, yeah, I'll cover your pay for the next couple months. And at that time, we didn't know how long this was going to go. I don't know if he's still paying that. Whatever the case may be, to have a kid like that, a rookie, to step up and say, I'm going to pay for this, and beat the owner to the punch,
it's not a good look. And the same thing applies here, that yes, what David Price is doing is a great thing, but he shouldn't really have to. And that's been the bigger news this week, is from the minor leagues. As Ian said there have been mass layoffs of minor league players, the Orioles included in that group, have laid off, they released a list of names. I'm assuming they're all, I didn't see anyone recognizable on there. You're obviously not going to see any of your prospects, your true prospects that have a chance of reaching the major leagues, or even guys that have a chance of reaching AAA. They're not getting laid off here. I mean, this is mostly probably not even single-A guys. We're talking about development league guys here. The Oakland A's also caught some heat. They said they would not be playing their players their usual stipend, which I think for the A's, it varies from team to team, but I want to say roughly $400 a week for a minor league player in the A's system. That will not be paid to the players. Now, they still remain on the team. They're still an employee of the team. They're just not getting paid. So this is just a terrible situation for them, at least in the short term, because it's not how should this be? Again, just in the short term. Long term situation is different, because the guys that aren't getting paid their stipend, they're still on the team, and hopefully when the minors return in 2021, as we all hope, they will have a job again. But in the short term right now, the guys that got laid off are better off. They can seek unemployment benefits. It's extremely unlikely, but they can seek free agency and join another team. I don't see that happening. I don't see anyone signing these players or adding players right now. That's nearly impossible, but it technically can happen. But at the very least, they can seek unemployment benefits. The guys that aren't getting paid their stipend, they can't. They're still employed. And that's just the Oakland A's. I don't know if any other teams have said they just flat out won't pay their players, but I know a lot of teams have said they will continue to pay their minor leaguers through at least June. The Orioles are one of those teams. And then obviously in the case of the Dodgers, I mean, David Price hasn't even put on the Dodgers uniform yet. I mean, maybe he did in spring training briefly, but he hasn't played a single regular season game for the Dodgers, and he's shelling out money for their minor league system. That just shows you the type of guy he is, a very stand-up guy, and we will definitely applaud him for that. Again, the baseline here for me is just that you hope this doesn't have a serious, long-lasting negative impact on the minor leagues. But unfortunately, that almost seems inevitable with what we knew, or the direction the minors were heading even before the coronavirus. Things were looking bleak. So you add this whole pandemic on top of that, you sort of say, well, how could things end up being all right after this?
Yeah, man, it's a terrible situation overall, obviously. And there seems to be ways to get it right, and some of the teams are doing that. But I mean, I'm not going to say the minor leagues are going to go away, but there'll be minor league teams that won't come back in any capacity. It's just like any other business, right? You're seeing department stores close. You're seeing restaurants close nationwide. The impacts of this thing are going to be felt for a long time. And people say the new normal, like, we're not getting back to the old normal. So, we might be able to go to restaurants again, but there will be less of them. We might be able to go to baseball games again, but there will be less teams to support. They get your small teams. Like, I live in Frederick County. The Frederick Keys, laugh or not, are a big deal. People go to their games. Like, it's something to look forward to. It's something someone in Frederick grows up like, oh yeah, you go to the Keys games. Go to the Keys. Frederick Keys might not make it. Think of how many other areas across the country are, these small towns that thrive on their minor league baseball team and all the cool promotions that minor league baseball has. I've always thought they outdo the pros by a ton because they have to be more creative. So it's sad to see people losing their jobs left and right. So it's just add baseball to the list where that's happening. But I'm with you. It's a terrible situation, and you just got to hope that it turns out as good as it can. But at this point, I think expecting the worst might not be the wrong idea either.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you on the minor league teams being just a huge part of their community. Areas in this country that are not, I mean, they probably root for a major league team, but they live so far away that they'll never go to a major league game unless they plan out this extravagant trip or some vacation. They'll never get to see a major league game in person. there's areas in the country where all they have close to them is a minor league affiliate. So that is their world. They go to those games, and that's great because tickets are cheap and you can make a night out of it with a family of 4, and it's not too expensive. So, I mean, I'm looking at here in PA, we got a couple of independent league teams with the York Revolution and the Lancaster Barnstormers. I'm looking at those leagues. They're not even backed by Major League Baseball or an affiliate of Major League Baseball. They sort of just operate on their own as their own independent league. I'm thinking about how they're going to survive. Is the whole league going to go under? How much money do they have pooled up to withstand something like this? You don't know. It's all up in the air right now, but the York Revolution, I'll speak here as someone that lives in southern York County, Pennsylvania. I mean, the York Revolution are a pretty big deal in York County. I mean, a lot of people around here obviously root for the Orioles, or maybe they're Phillies fans, Pirates fans, something like that. But everyone that goes to Revolution games and stuff like that. So to see that disappear and have that empty stadium there in York, or see that stadium taken away or used for something else, I don't know. I mean, it would just be very disappointing, and we'll leave it at that. But we're going to end on a good note. I made sure to save this for last because we're going to end with some hope, and that is coming from the NHL and the NBA. And both of them are, as I said, getting the wheels in motion. In the case of the NHL, throw out nothing concrete in the sense that it's actually going to happen. Obviously, we have to get over the hurdle of the health standpoint and all the testing and everything that needs to happen from that standpoint. We have to cross that threshold first. But if the NHL were to return, we have the playoff format. And the NBA, we don't have a format yet, but we're hearing serious talks about where it would take place. You know, those plans are being thrown out there. We're seeing dates thrown out there. The NHL has like a soft date. They don't have a hard deadline, but they have a target date. The NBA has a target date at the end of July. So to quickly surmise this, I mostly want to focus on the NHL because we actually have a playoff format that we can sink our teeth into. They're going to, first and foremost, skip the end of the regular season. They're going to jump over that, go straight to the playoffs, but the playoffs are being expanded to 24 teams rather than the usual 16. And the playoff format, do my best to explain this quickly, but your top 4 seeds in each conference will get a first-round bye, while seeds 5 through 12 will play a best-of-5 series against each other. Your typical seeding there, 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, and so on. At that point, again, best-of-5 series there. The winner of the 5 versus 12 will play the 4 seed. Winner of 6 versus 11 will play the 3 seed, and so on. Typical seeding tournament rules that we see in all tournaments, and March Madness in particular.
So it's actually, this is the one thing about the return to play format that I'm not the biggest fan of. There's no guarantee who the top 4 teams are going to play yet. And the reason for that is Tampa Bay complained because they were saying, well, you know, there has to be some sort of play for us to get ready so that if the Hurricanes and the Rangers are playing, they're going to be in better shape, more in game shape than us. It wouldn't be fair for one of those teams to play us, and we haven't played anyone yet. So what the top 4 teams are going to do is they're playing a round-robin type tournament so they can get up to speed and get games going in, but they're making that count towards your seeding. So the Bruins right now are the 1 seed, but there's no guarantee that they'll be the 1 seed once the second round of the playoffs start. And I think that's unfair to Boston and unfair to I think it's St. Louis, who's atop the Western Conference. So they played 68 games. They're the 1 seed, but now they've got to play this tournament so that everybody can get their wheels moving, and that could change where their seeding lies. And I don't think that's the right idea at all. In the grand scheme of things, I like it, but there's no guarantee who the Caps would play or who anyone would play yet if you're a top 4 seed. Now, if you're in the 5 through the 12 group, then yeah, you know who you're playing in the first round. There's no doubt about it. So it'll be fun. I think it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But again, I think it's going to be beginning of August before we see anything concrete.
And then, of course, the NBA is still still working out their format, but we do know that they want to kind of host everything at the Walt Disney Resort in Orlando. It would be convenient. You have all the players staying there in hotels, resort hotels. Everyone's sort of on this campus, so to speak. But nothing has been announced there in terms of seating or format or any changes there. I don't know if you would really need to see any changes, but I guess we're still having a debate as far as the NBA goes. Do we just skip straight to the playoffs? The only other thing that I wanted to bring up here was, I guess, Damian Lillard, who raised an interesting argument from that standpoint of skipping straight to the playoffs. You know, you have teams that are just completely out of it already. I mean, I guess the Blazers aren't too far back. I don't know. I don't know enough about the standings, but I think I saw the Blazers are not completely out of it, but they're in a fight. They would need to fight hard to get like an 8 seed.
They're like 4.5 games out.
Yeah.
And Lillard missed a bunch of games, so he's all salty that they would do it this way and he doesn't get a chance to help lead his team back to the playoffs. That's the gist of his argument.
Right. Well, I thought that he was saying that if they're going to play regular season type games before the playoffs, because if they're just going to skip straight to the playoffs, I mean, yeah, I'd be disappointed, but you're also not playing. I thought his argument was that if they are forced to come back and play games, but it doesn't mean anything. Like if you're the Knicks or something and you're not even in it, why, if you're a star player on the Knicks, which I don't even know if they have a star player, but a similar team, a bad team with a star player, why would you even risk playing or jumping through all these hoops? Because again, this is not normal. You're not playing in your usual arena. You're going to stay at it's a resort, but you're staying in this close proximity of all these other players. You're pretty much playing for nothing. So I get that argument of, if I'm a star player or I'm an important player on a losing team, why would I jump through all these extra hoops to come back and play? At that point, you're just purely playing for the enjoyment of the game, which if anyone wants to do that, more power to them, but I can't fault someone like Lillard for sitting out.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point that he makes overall. I think I don't know where he got the idea that he'd be coming back and playing for nothing. I haven't followed the NBA as closely with this because they've seemed kind of far away. My focus has been on hockey and soccer. But just kind of looking up his quote, I don't have a problem with him not wanting. Why would you play a game that? But I guess, here's another thought. Like, well, no, I don't know. The whole situation confuses me. Orlovsky's so strong against him, and that doesn't make sense to me either. But as long as they're playing games and they have a chance to move up in the standings and make the playoffs, then I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be for it. But if they got to play and they can't move up and it doesn't matter, I guess what's the point? Like I'd have to look more into what the NBA stance on this was, because I had a misunderstanding of the issue itself. I thought they were going to allow him to come back and have a chance to catch up. But if they're going to have him come back and they can't move up in the standings, what's the point of coming back? Just go straight to the playoffs. It's a pointless, scenario to come back in that under those circumstances and in that way. So I'd agree with you on that.
On the whole, I would agree with Lillard and his assessment of the situation. And we'll leave it at that, I guess. Unless real quick you had a Hyun-Soo Kim update. I don't know if anything new has happened with him.
Well, sadly, Hyun-Soo Kim was held off base for the second time of the season this morning. It was a tragic morning for the LG Twins. They took their first loss in as long as I can possibly remember. It seemed like they win every game, and he plays a huge part in it. This was as of yesterday. Through 20 games, Hyun-Soo Kim was slashing .410, .462, .602. If you're unfamiliar with a Major League slash line, go ahead and hit Google, and it'll tell you that's pretty damn good. The .410 average, the .462 on base, and the .602 slugging. He's been one of the best players in the KBO so far. The power numbers aren't coming. He hit second, so the RBI opportunities aren't always there. But in terms of being an on-base machine, tearing the cover off the ball. Hyun-Soo Kim continues to dominate. I've also been introduced to a new nickname for Hyun-Soo Kim fans. It's called the Hun Hive. Big fan of that. So you'll see me tweeting that out every now and then as I continue to inform the masses on the Hyun-Soo Kim train, and we'll keep giving you guys an update on how he's doing. But he's been killing it. The Twins lost this morning, so they'll be looking to bounce back tomorrow. But he's still playing well, and obviously he's dominating the league.
Yeah, 410. That's crazy for a batting average, but he's just continues to dominate. What more can you say? We're always rooting for him. So yeah, we're honorary LG Twins fans, more so Kim fans. The Hun Hive, whatever you want to call it, we're a part of it. Well, Ian will continue to give you those updates, I'm sure, on the podcast, because the more we do this, a week like this, we did end on a positive note, but it's mostly negative stuff to talk about with trying to navigate the pandemic in the world of sports, and as I said earlier, our quest to return to sports. So we'll try to at least throw in something positive every week, and if that has to be the Kim update, so be it. We can count on him. He's the hero we need in these times.
You can count on Hun.
Count on Kim. How about that? I like that.
Count on Kim. I like it.
The new tagline of the podcast. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. That's episode 104. Again, as always, if you didn't know, if you missed the last couple episodes, podcast is on YouTube. It's on Spotify. You can subscribe on those outlets if you prefer to consume podcast on there. Go ahead, listen on there. They're going to be uploaded from there from now on. Still going to remain on all the other outlets. Don't worry. And yeah, we'll talk to you next week.